There are people who wait weeks for a single match. People who celebrate one goal like it's one of the best moments of their whole year. People who go to bed in a bad mood because their team lost. And then there are the ones watching all of it from the outside. They don't hate football. They have nothing against the sport. They just don't feel anything special when they see it. And that tends to raise a pretty curious question. Why do some people live football with so much intensity, while others stay completely indifferent? Is there something different about them? Are they missing something the rest of us have? Or maybe the real question is a different one entirely. Why do millions of people feel the wins and losses of total strangers as if they were their own? Because if you stop and think about it for even a second, it's actually kind of strange. 22 people running after a ball in a city you've probably never visited. And yet, when the match ends, there are people feeling pride, joy, pure euphoria, or deep sadness, as if they'd stepped onto the pitch themselves. Psychology has been studying this for decades, and one of the most interesting explanations has to do with something called social identity. As human beings, we carry a very deep need to belong. We need to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. It could be a family, a group of friends, a community, a profession, a hobby, or a football team. When you identify strongly with a group, you start folding a piece of that group into your own identity. And that means whatever happens to the group also shapes how you feel about yourself. Back in the 70s, the psychologist Robert Cialdini noticed something fascinating. After a college team won, a lot of students suddenly started wearing the clothing and the symbols of their university far more often. It was as if the team's success made them feel better about who they were. They hadn't played, they hadn't trained, they hadn't influenced the result in any way at all. But psychologically, they felt like a slice of that victory belonged to them too. That's why it's so common to hear people say, "We won," or "We played terribly today," even when they watched the whole thing from the couch at home. It isn't a contradiction. It's a natural consequence of how our social identity works. When the group wins, we feel like we win too. And when it falls apart, the blow reaches us as well. But here's where it gets really interesting. What about the people who feel none of that? The ones who watch an important final and simply carry on with their day like it's any other. For a long time, people assumed those individuals were less passionate, less emotional, maybe even less sociable. But psychology points in a completely different direction. The need to belong is still there. It just expresses itself in another way. Because football was never really the point. The point is connection. It's the feeling of being part of something. And some people find that exact feeling in completely different places. Maybe in a creative community, maybe in music, maybe in video games, maybe in a tight-knit group of friends, maybe in their work, maybe in personal projects they pour their heart into. The difference isn't in the need to belong. The difference is in the vehicle each person uses to satisfy it. And that explains why some people never manage to connect with football, even when they genuinely try. Because for emotional involvement to exist, real identification has to come first. Without it, the match loses almost all of its psychological meaning. Imagine someone asks you to follow, for 90 full minutes, the score of two teams you don't know, two cities you've never set foot in, two groups of players you have no connection to at all. The result would probably feel completely irrelevant to you. And that's exactly what happens for a lot of people when they watch football. They don't feel like anything is at stake. Not because they're cold, not because they lack emotions, but because they never built the bond that would make the outcome matter. And here's another interesting piece of the puzzle. Uncertainty. Because one of the reasons sport is so absorbing for millions of people is that our brains respond intensely to unpredictable outcomes. When we don't know what's about to happen, our attention stays switched on. The chance of a win, the chance of a loss, the chance that everything flips in the final minutes. All of it keeps the brain locked onto what's unfolding in front of us. The reward doesn't only arrive when the goal goes in. It shows up during the wait, during the anticipation, during the tension. That's why the last few minutes of a close match feel so unbearably intense to fans. But there's one essential condition for that whole mechanism to work. The result has to matter to you. If there's no emotional attachment to either team, the uncertainty loses almost all of its pull. And then the match becomes nothing more than something you observe from the outside. No tension, no expectation, no emotional stake. Like watching someone flip a coin over and over and over. There's also another aspect we rarely stop to talk about: social pressure. Because in a lot of environments, football works almost like a shared language. The conversations revolve around the matches. The scores show up everywhere you look. The celebrations spill out into public spaces. And whoever doesn't take part can slowly start to feel out of place. Some people even fake the interest. They nod along. They comment on the result. They repeat opinions they picked up from someone else. Not because they actually care, but because feeling different can be genuinely uncomfortable. And that brings us to a pretty interesting conclusion. The psychology of people who don't watch football isn't really about football at all. It's about identity, about belonging, about connection, and about the way each person finds those things in their own place. For some, that connection shows up in a stadium packed with thousands of people. For others, it shows up in a deep conversation with a friend, in a book, in a hobby, in a project, in a community that shares the thing they love. There's no single right way to feel part of something, and there's no psychological obligation to get excited about the same things that excite everyone around you. Because in the end, it's not about how much you feel, it's about where you choose to point those feelings. The people who don't watch football aren't disconnected, they aren't empty, they aren't broken in some quiet way. They've simply found another place to invest their attention, their energy, and their sense of belonging. And if you already know exactly what that place is for you, then you've probably already found the very thing so many people are still searching for when they follow a team. Thanks for watching. So what about you? Do you love football with everything you've got, or have you never quite managed to connect with it? Let me know down in the comments.